As a listener to Unity Online Radio, you might be curious to learn more about Unity, or you might already be well-versed in its teachings and history. Either way, be sure to check out the beautiful new unity.org website. It's arranged to help you find what you need about healing, relationships, prosperity, guidance, and prayer. Full of interesting articles, video meditations, and ways for you to discover, grow, and experience. Spend time on the Unity website. It's unity.org.
You're listening to UnityOnlineRadio.org, the voice of an awakening world.
Learn the language of spirit. This is The Intuitive Life with Laura Wooster.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to The Intuitive Life, where we walk together and support each other on the path to becoming more spiritually aware, enlightened, and inspired. My name is Laura Wooster, and we will be taking calls today, but it's not for readings. It's only for questions pertaining to the subject matter today. Alrighty? And so we'll get to that in just a moment, but like I said, we are taking phone calls, but only for questions pertaining to the topic, and the phone number is 816-251-3555. And before I get to my lovely guest today, just a couple of notes. March 17th, I'll be at Circles of Wisdom in Methuen, Massachusetts, in person, yay, for a mediumship demonstration. And it'll be at 7 o'clock in the evening. Go to my website at laurawooster.com for that. Also, if you're not in the New England area, but you'd like to witness a mediumship demonstration, we are doing an online demonstration next week on the 17th of February, Thursday evening at 7 p.m. Eastern to 9 p.m. Eastern. There'll be 4 mediums, and it'll be myself, Lori Sheridan, Janet Nohavik, and John Holland. And it's a fundraiser for our local food banks. So there'll be 3 different organizations that will be benefiting from this. All the profits will go to an organization on the seacoast in New Hampshire, also the Boston Greater Food Bank, and then also another organization in New Jersey. So 3 separate food banks will be benefiting from this fundraiser. So if you would like to take part, it's only $20, and you can go to my website at laurawooster.com. And you'll see that there on my calendar, also on the homepage of my calendar. And again, it's 4 mediums in one night, and you don't even have to get out of your jammies, and you can help people. So what I love about this, there's so much in the world that we want to help people with. There's so many people who are in need. But if we can take one thing off of their back as far as what their needs are, and helping people with food insecurity, that just goes so far to be able to allow them to have more energy to deal with other things that maybe we can't help them with. So any little bit that we can do, I think, is good. So if you could help us out with that, just go to laurawooster.com and check that out. So without further ado, I do want to bring my lovely guest on today. My guest today is a spiritual medium and an ordained minister for over 20 years, Willa White. She's a registered medium in Lilydale since 2003. She's been featured on CNN in Lisa Lang's episode of This Is Life, The Mediums of Lilydale. And she also hosts a wonderful podcast on Wednesdays called Wednesdays with Willa, and she covers different spiritual topics every week, and she has amazing guests on. It's always lovely to watch. And also, she's an active member of the Lilydale community, and she resides there year-round. And without further ado, let's bring on Willa White. Hi, Willa.
Hello, Laura. Thanks so much for having me on your show.
Well, thank you for being on. I've been waiting to have you on for so long. I'm like, yay, finally, we have Willa on. So excited. Because you have a very unique, it's an honor to have you on, really, because you have such a unique perspective. Because, well, first of all, let's just say, for people who don't know what Lilydale is, can you share a little bit about this community?
Sure. So Lilydale is the world's largest center for the religion of spiritualism. And what that means is we have a wonderful community of spiritualists who believe that God is all there is, and that mediumship and healing are expressions of God's love. And so we have a wonderful summer program that runs usually the last the first weekend of June. So this year it'll be June 24th, the first week, that Friday. And then it'll run to Labor Day. So it's usually a 10-week season, full program of events that you can attend. There are daily events of message services and healing services, lectures, and we have wonderful workshop presenters that come in from all over the world, and they teach about mediumship and healing and spiritual understandings. And so there are thought exchanges, there are hotels, there are guest houses, there are restaurants here, and it's just a wonderful, very unique space to develop mediumship, but also to connect with nature, because we're on a beautiful Cassadaga Lake that has a lovely swan that swims on it, and you can walk in the old growth forest, which is a rarity in and of itself. It will never be timbered, and some of our services are held in the woods, and it's like an outdoor cathedral.
Beautiful. Someday I'm going to get there. Can you believe I've not been to Lilydale yet? It's incredible. Like, when am I going to get there? I've served the churches now that they've been online. There's one church that I've served a couple of times, but it's so I've had the pleasure of doing that. But I'm going to make it a priority to get there. But also, this is a lot of people who come into, to grow into being a medium. They don't start out with a spiritualist background, but you have, because you have that unique perspective. Yeah.
Yes, I'm very fortunate and blessed that my parents raised us with this understanding of mediumship and healing in my extended family, and my parents' journey really did shape my own. My mother is a professional medium in her own right, and also a spirit artist, which is a very special thing.
Yes.
And my father is well-versed in all things spiritual as well. And so they supported my journey as a medium, and I attended development circles here in Lilydale and grew my mediumship same time as I was getting a college degree, right?
Wow.
And it's one of those things where, well, when you're in high school and you're trying to figure out what you want to be when you grow up, medium is not on the list.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
What happens is all of a sudden you find yourself going, this is what feels right. This is what I know myself to be. I saw spirit when I was just a small child, and of course that was supported by my parents. I could talk to them about anything relating to spiritual matters, and it really did make a difference in my own growth and being able to be one of the youngest mediums to develop here in Lilydale.
That's wonderful. Yeah, so that's because there's always an aspect, especially for developing mediums who may have come to recognize that connection later in life. They struggle with, is this for real? Am I not mentally well? Like, am I fooling myself? Am I making this stuff up? Like all of that. I mean, I imagine a lot of that you didn't, maybe there was aspects of that, but maybe not at the same level that maybe other people have, right?
Exactly. I mean, you can't go through a school system and not have that sense of, well, let's see if this is backed up by science and
Right.
Is this my imagination? Because when you go to school, not everybody has those kinds of experiences, or at least they're not sharing about it. Right. And so having that space at home for me was such a beautiful support system to grow. And I realized that so many other people don't have that, whether they're socially among their friends or with their family. But there's something inside of them. There's something that unique expression of their soul that is telling them that they are sacred and that they are of the divine, and that there's a reason that they can know things if they're in that intuitional mode. But also there are spirit connections that can happen, communications with those that have passed that can be really valuable and really help other people to grow their lives in beautiful spiritual ways. Yes,
and that's one thing I've noticed recently with people is because I've connected with some people who are like, but this is so different from the other senses. I'm like, not really. When you really get to know your own senses, it's like you don't think seeing with your own eyes is weird. You don't think hearing something is weird. Why would you think that sensing something is weird, right? So when you have students that are coming to you and they're still trying to wrap their mind around the fact that their psychic senses are just as it's just as real as their physical senses. How do you lead them to trust that?
So the first exercise I tend to do, because I do have a development circle that I lead,
Mm-hmm.
and first thing I do with them is get them in touch with their soul. Because if you can understand that you're in connection and having a direct experience, that's the highest. Direct experience is the highest of all the ways of gaining real knowledge. Because once you've had that direct experience and real knowledge, it's just a matter of living in accordance with that truth and putting it all into practice. So the mediumship and the healing, this just kind of reinforces the spiritual principles and practices. So first it's about communing with that God power. Prayer is the excellent stepping stone to get you into that. I always lead people through a prayer and a guided meditation, and I hear people say, "Oh my gosh, I felt it. I knew I was with the space of my soul." And you can access that sacred space within you and really tune into your soul first, because it's when you're doing mediumship development, it's really about spiritual unfoldment, the development of your soul and that conscious awareness and that linking with your soul to do the work. Because as mediums, what we're doing is a sacred connection with spirit and with loved ones. And it's a joyful thing, and we can laugh along the way, and we can cry along the way.
Absolutely.
But it's something that is about connecting with the soul first. So once we have that, then we're in touch with that highest expression. The rest is so easy. I've had people come to Circle, and they're just like, "Oh my gosh, I got something the first night!" So they didn't know they could do that, and it's because they give themselves over to the joy. They're entering. I say we're all going to get into the water tonight. So we're all going to. It's about the immersion and knowing that you're okay to get into the waters of your spirit and of your soul. Having a safe place to do that. That's why I highly recommend that if people are truly wanting to develop as mediums, that they find a development circle that is right for them, so that once a week, mind, body, spirit, they can develop their spiritual gifts.
Yes, that's so crucial. And I love that you mentioned, the joyful part of it, because sometimes we take this work so seriously that it almost we become so inflexible, and we're not able to really sense. We kind of close ourselves off to spirit if we become inflexible, because we're so focused on the seriousness of it. Which, yes, we do take it seriously, but the joy is just as important. And I love that you mentioned that right off the bat. So for someone, I mean, obviously, there's people who do this work for, this is their profession, their vocation. But how do you feel about people who want to just discover their connection to spirit, but they don't necessarily want to be a medium?
Oh, there are lots of ways to do that for themselves, to reach that true inner voice. Yes. And it's about accessing intuition through the imagination. I've noticed that this is something I say often, is that intuition and imagination live in the same house. Yes. And imagination and intuition, they are so uniquely linked when you start to unfold as a spirit, not just as a medium or as a healer and any of those things, but just as a soul. And you start to recognize that intuition will use imagination to convey information. And so you may start to think, oh, well, I'm making this all up. And then what happens is you start to connect the dots, and the information that you're being given, you realize is very accurate and helpful in your own life, and potentially able to help other people, maybe not as a professional medium or psychic, but that just understanding it on a family friend level sometimes, and for your own place. But it first starts with that knowing that you're never alone in the sacred space, that you're always with a greater force, and that once you're within that sacred space, that's where the magic of transformation begins. And so tuning into your soul, it's like that inner body awareness of creating space. So like you could do this on an everyday level. Let's say you're just waiting for something, or when you're like you are, Laura, you're listening to me as I'm speaking with you, and to the other people who are tuning into this podcast, they're listening. And they're just in that moment. Or when you pause to look at the sky or a tree or a flower or your partner or a child, you feel the aliveness within you at the same time. Because whenever you inhabit your body in that particular way, it's serving as an anchor to staying present in the now. So it prevents you from losing yourself in the thinking and in the emotion or in the external situation. It's what's helping you to stay tuned in to your soul and into your God awareness. So we have those moments. And so when you start seeing everything as God, you start seeing the miraculous in the everyday and in the everything. And it's basically a transfiguration of the ordinary, the daily events, those circumstances, that it lifts you up into the spiritual plane, and you start to see them as the signs, as the indications of divine leading you in your life. And so all those circumstances become part of your personal revelation. Mm-hmm. And so when you're looking at seeing those forces in your daily life, you start to notice that there is the seen and there's the unseen. So we always inhabit both of the realms. Mm-hmm. You can recognize either alone, each one of them alone, but when you do that means you're blind to the other, and you're actually depriving yourself of this great source of energy. So I tell people, you've got radar, turn it on. Yes. And the walls, it's nice to know that we have the divine aid, that it's infinite, and it's there for us, and it's as available as the air we're able to breathe. So it's a remembrance of those things. But prayer force, I think what brings all the senses into focus is when you're in that prayer force, because prayer force is really life force, and when you're connecting within that, then you feel the communion with the God power, that which is the universal, and that feeds your soul and brings you to greater life and helps you through the problem solving, helps you enter into the silence, and of course the big word, trust. Trust.
Oh, yes. Mm-hmm. That's right. Yeah, and that's a good segue, because there's something that I've noticed, especially recently, or maybe people more vocal about it recently, is that even those people who say that they're very spiritual, or they when we know they're very spiritual and they come from a very spiritual background, that they're a lot of people are sensing a disconnect, or they feel like there's a disconnect with their spirit. So and of course, any human being, if you're going through stuff, you're going to feel that at some point in your life, no matter how spiritual you may be or how aware you are. So what are some things, I mean, obviously there's prayer and meditation, but what are some ways that people can sort of bide their time as they sort of get to rediscover their connection to spirit?
So that's what I call practicing the presence of God. Mm-hmm. So it's what I call, it's almost like we have to feel like we're turned away from God, and then we discover God again. We discover that we're reconnected again. Mm-hmm. And what happens is people think that they're separated. It's an illusion of separation, really. Yes. But it's like this idea of, oh no, my Wi-Fi's not working right now. What am I going to do? It's like, things stop because the internet's not working, right? Because the computer's not working, or however that is. I'm just putting it into the perspective of the modern day. Mm-hmm. And you start to realize, wait a minute, I'm always connected. I just have to remember that I am. And I remember, this is years ago now, National Geographic had come out with a picture of God, and it's understood within the human brain, when they've hooked people up to the different analysis of things, that they can sense God when they enter into prayer, but it can be as easy as just taking a deep breath. Mm-hmm. So breathing seems to really assist in that process, especially if we're needing connection, because breath, it helps us to remember to go into that, let's be calm, let's go into that breathing mode. So breathing, of course, helps. Nature helps me. If I have had a long day, I go take a walk, and it is such a refreshing thing. Mm-hmm. And as if I look at the trees, and I could see how I can be rooted and grounded the way true trees are, but I can also be lifted. So we have some very tall trees here, because some of the species are 200-300 years old, and they're very, very tall, and I can see all the way up to the crown of the trees. And it's as if the crown of my head is touching the sky too. And so just by those little, I know it seems kind of imaginative or playful, but it's those understandings that if I can just allow myself to touch the sky for a moment, just for one moment, I can reach that next space of light within myself. So to some degree, there is a bit of self-talk that is needed in those moments mm-hmm. to get into that remembrance of you're passing through a shadow time, and you will be moving into the light, and that it's temporary. And it kind of goes back to the Buddhism, right? The permanence, the impermanence, the recognition that things are shifting. And ultimately, we do have emotional things. We say, oh my gosh, I feel awful about the situation. Some people might say, I feel numb, I feel dark, I feel very overwhelmed. There are all kinds of things I've been hearing from folks too. Mm-hmm. It's as if they have to just sort of see that emotion or that image is coming to mind, and then ask themselves if they feel positive or negative with that, if they're uncomfortable with what they're feeling. Why am I uncomfortable? So sometimes they have to think through those things. But if you really want to just kind of blast a bit past that, it's about saying, okay, is it in my highest and best good to be in this mode? How can I move into what is known as qualified energy? Because we have qualified energy and unqualified energy. Mm-hmm. And qualified energy is love and peace and joy, and unqualified energy is anger, fear, worry, resentment. And if you tune into the news or any of that, or all the negative Nellies that seem to be out there, you're going to find yourself really sliding into on the ice toward the unqualified energy. And so it does start to go into a spiritual discipline that you put yourself into, that recognition of I get to choose my pattern of reaction.
Yes.
I get to choose that. So is this a healthy pattern of reaction? If it is, I'm going to keep that. If it's an unhealthy pattern of reaction, I'm going to let that go. And I'm going to move into what I know to be my highest and best good. And even if I don't know what direction I need to go in this particular moment, I'm going to go about my business, so to speak, but I'm going to recognize that my soul ultimately is not afraid, that it will not be a voice of fear, and that it knows that it's a spark of the divine. And so it has this unlimited potential for love and peace and joy. And your soul just asks you to go deeper into that understanding of the experience, to help you to have that awareness of perhaps the spiritual energetics of the situation. And that's where your intuition, your soul, will deeply speak to you in those moments. Mm-hmm. And sometimes the information that we receive is only to give us the increased clarity. It's not so that we go and into another person's life and say, now I'm going to fix you. Here we go. Yeah. This only so that you can do what is right within your own internal space, clearing the energy of what is needed in those moments. So if a walk doesn't do it for me, I get myself to Lake Erie, which isn't too far from, it has these nice big waves, right? And it just crashes in, and it's incredible how having that kind of crashing energy really starts to soothe for a while, right?
Oh,
it takes things. It's our beautiful lake here in Lilydale can be so calm, like glass at moments. It's like it's a perfect kayaking lake in many ways because you can just kind of paddle in, and you can hear the drippy drops of water off of the paddle. But if you go to Lake Erie, then you get your crashy waves. So sometimes we need to just acknowledge that we're having a turmoil and recognize that will recede from our life, and we have to have it maybe in that symbolic waterway or through intense exercise or something that kind of heaves it out of us. Do you understand?
Right.
Energetically.
Absolutely. Moving that energy, exactly. Yes,
Right.
and oftentimes going to the beach for me, I mean, the crashing waves definitely kind of moves something energetically for me, and also it reminds me of how small we really are as human beings, and there is something bigger, and it's very cleansing in a lot of ways, energetically. But I love that. I know we're coming up on the break, but I love that you're describing the spiritual reconnection as a process rather than one simple thing that you do. I mean, it can be a very simple process, but it's still a process. And recognizing that reconnecting to spirit or feeling that connection to spirit is a continual process, which I love that you're bringing that all up. But we're coming up to the break right now. And just a reminder, we are taking calls, but just for questions pertaining to connecting to spirit, reconnecting to your own soul, your own spirit. And we're here with a lovely spiritual minister, medium, Willa White from Lilydale, New York. And we'll be taking your calls after the break if you have a question for Willa. 816-251-3555.
Discover the power within. UnityOnlineRadio.org, the voice of an awakening world.
Welcome back to The Intuitive Life with Laura Wooster.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to The Intuitive Life. And I'm here with my lovely guest, Willa White from Lilydale, New York. And if you'd like to check out Willa's website, you can go to willawhite.com, and that's WILLAWHITE.com. And we are taking calls, but just for questions pertaining to the subject, which is how to reconnect to your spirit. So if you have any questions about that, if you've struggled with some things around that, feel free to call in. We're not doing readings, like I said, but it is we will answer questions. So Willa, obviously, what you had mentioned before the break, you were talking about getting reconnected to spirit, and what it sounds like is prayer can be more than just reciting words or speaking to spirit or source or whatever you want to call the greater power. But a lot of people who come from maybe traditional religious backgrounds, sometimes they might feel, sometimes I'll see people bristle a little bit when I mention, when they ask me what's a good way to get connected to spirit, like prayer is really good, meditation, and they go, ooh, and so I can kind of understand that a little bit coming from a traditional background. But what are some other options or another way to look at prayer so it's not so charged with that energy?
Okay, so I guess I would say prayer force is life force, like I said before, because prayer force not only releases the latent energies of our being, but it renews energies with vitality and with power. So you know how emotional and intellectual energy has to be released, or else the whole physical system starts to feel the effects of repressed power? You can feel it. If it's all cluttered up with that, if you don't release it, like I half jokingly said, we need something called a screaming hill that people can go and just scream and let it to some extent. But with prayer, that actually helps us to move past some of the suppressed energy. So you know how if you're in an automobile, like a car, and it's vibrating when the engine is just turning over, or you can hear and feel how it's racing if it's just in stationary position.
Yes.
Well, the whole car can it's shaking and it's quivering with all that suppressed energy, right? And there's this moment where the energy is released and the car goes, it starts driving down the road, and then you feel like you're in this harmonious rhythm, right? You feel like you're in this right action. Mm-hmm. So repressed emotions and those feelings are just like that, and they can do the same thing to your mentality and your body. So with that life force, that energy that's within you, that's this unlimited space, and it's the thing that helps run the whole world, right? The thing that's in you, this divine spark, is what this cosmic energy is all about. So the feeling of all of that is embodied in prayer, and something to remember that your whole being prays with you. It's like this recognition of, not just when you put your hands together, although there's a reason why we do that. There are a lot of chakras in the hands, and when we put them together, unite the right and left palm, there is an amazing energy exchange that comes with it. So, there is a reason for it. Once people understand there's a reason why we do these particular postures, then they go, oh my gosh, I want to do that again. So they just discover, because what's been lost sometimes in translation with religion is why we do that, why energetically that would help us to have a more effective prayer time. But anyway, we can do this embodied prayer. That's why, with yoga postures, it can be very wonderful and pronounced, or why certain religious traditions have them, in a position to pray. But when we're walking in nature, I pray a lot in that space. Or if I'm standing in the line at the grocery store waiting for my turn for checkout, it's a moment to just kind of breathe into the abdomen, and then we're there. But that daily prayer, it really is as necessary as food and water and air and exercise. And it's that inward soul nature that needs to be fed. It's like this recollection that we are not just a mundane being that is chopping wood, carrying water, so to speak, but that we have this recognition that we don't have to be spiritually depleted, that we don't have to always be racing around trying to feed others from some sort of empty basket that we have, that prayer is there to release the old energies, the old feelings, the emotions, and to refresh you with that new vitalizing life. So I think first it's about getting that into that right intention about prayer, so that we can then move into the right practice with prayer. Now, it looks different for different people for their practice, but ultimately, remembering that prayer is power, we can recognize that we're treating all of those things inside of us that we may energetically need to clear, not just emotionally clear, but energetically clear. That happens during prayer. And it's just that way of talking to God very intimately. It's that recognition that you're talking to your best friend. You can, everything can be told without fear of reprisal per se. But there's a reverence that I tend to go into when it comes to prayer. But there's a recognition that our faith, as we develop that trust and that confidence when we turn to God, when we say, God, I have literally done everything I could think of to do, everything I know, and I'm at my limit. I know that if you want me to do something about this, I don't know how to proceed in this. I'm in a corner. I'm blocked, and I simply don't know how to do anything more with this. And that's when you say, I am going to allow you to take over, God, and show me how to run things. And you could put a different word in there for God if that's a buzzword for you. Remember, you can You can put the correct universal light or infinite intelligence. Spiritualists like to say infinite intelligence or Mother, Father, God, however that floats your boat. But it's that recognition that a load can be lifted from your shoulders and your mind and your heart. And even if you pray and you don't necessarily feel free, sometimes it's about venting at first. Mm-hmm. I've been on the trails here at Lilydale and other places, and sometimes, when you first start walking a trail and you're by yourself and you're needing to get your yayas out, you're wanting to kick a rock. You're just so tired of something. And there's like this stomping almost that you can energetically feel you're doing. And if you just go ahead and do that, and then I always pick a spot on the trail as my turnaround spot. It might be a big boulder or a particular tree, and at whatever that spot is, I'll stop there, mm-hmm. and I'll heave a big breath or two, and then I will just say, God, I give this all up to you. I recognize that I have had all of these thoughts, all of these feelings, all of these overwhelmed things going on. I give this to you, mm-hmm. and then you know what I do? I let it go, and I turn myself right around, and I walk that path back. And on the return of the path, I can see the green of the trees and the leaves, and, oh, look, there's a squirrel, and things like that.
It clears your vision, for sure, yes.
I've walked into the fairy tale land, but you don't have to necessarily do the physical walk if you don't have the time for it. You can still do that while you're seated at home and in prayer. So that's a way of releasing it. But one of the most spiritual people I ever met, he was a dishwasher and at a restaurant, and he would wash dishes, and you know what he would do? While he was washing the dishes, he would pray for all the people who had made the food, all of the people who had served them, all of the people who had eaten the food, all of the lives that these people would touch. He was praying the whole time. Can you imagine?
Absolutely.
Most people, when they think about washing dishes, they're like, oh, this is the last thing I want to do. He turned it into a spiritual exercise. So when we can turn that which is considered the mundane into a spiritual exercise of perhaps adding that prayer to it, it takes on a greater meaning, it takes on a life of its own, and we start to move out of our grumbling pain and into service to others.
Yes.
In service of the divine. And that's where we truly feel ordained by God in those moments. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. I mean, I do believe there is a quote. I forget whose quote it is. It was something about the way you walk upon the earth is a prayer in itself. So, so that's it. And so a lot of times we think it's something that's has to be confined to a building or a moment or anything. It doesn't have to be a specific moment. It can be the way, like literally the way you live your life in the moment. And I love how you said, like, sometimes in a grocery store, you even like you might be saying a prayer, and I do that myself. I'll be in line and we'll just be waiting, and I have a moment, and I just kind of send out a thought to the people around me, like, that we're all blessed to be able to be here and to be able to purchase this food to bring home to our families. And it's just a different way of looking at things, and it's prayer can be a process. It doesn't have to be a one specific moment.
And it helps us to be more patient with what's going on, what's unfolding in our lives, and what's unfolding in the lives of others, because so often, yes, we're praying for ourselves, but we're praying for other people. Because sometimes good things happen, bad things happen, in quotes, to good people, and you are just like, oh, why, and you're praying for them, and you're like, God, please, can you make this happen and that happen? And you realize that you've kind of got into this space where you're like ordering God around. Well, because this isn't as going up to the drive-through window and saying, and would you like fries with that too? It comes to that place of we have to recognize that we set the prayer out there as an intention for whatever is the highest and best good for that individual or for that situation. And that helps a lot in terms of reconnecting with our own soul, because once we say the prayer for someone else, a lot of the worry drops away if we let it. if we really say, God, I recognize I'm worried about so-and-so, I have faith and I trust in their journey. Amen. And it's a real release of that force, like we talked about before with the car. Sometimes it moves us where we need to go, and so that we're back into the rhythm. And so when we're wanting to reconnect to our spirit, that's why some people say, oh, prayer, like you said before. But when you really break down the components of prayer and how it can be utilized, you start to go, why haven't I been doing this before? You start to go, holy cow, it's just like a waste of energy that I didn't apply itself. I didn't apply this appropriately in my life before, but now I can see. Now I can see how I can revisit those moments, and in the here and the now and in the future, how I can move into that reconnection. And you're practicing life, you're practicing that presence of God and seeing it in yourself and in other people, and seeing how those vibrational frequencies merge and what happens from all of that. Life is a beautiful thing if we let it be.
Oh, that's for sure. Yes, and sometimes people beat themselves up when they get frustrated, or there's resentment or something, and they just feel like, what's wrong with me if I'm feeling these negative emotions that aren't helpful? But I think if we just look at that, it's obviously we embrace our humanness and look at that as an invitation for prayer, or the door to open to prayer, right? To sort of giving that power to the greater source.
I'll throw this little thing out too. Sometimes the things that we're feeling are not our own, and we take them on as if they are.
Yes, you're absolutely right.
Great feeling, and that's another reason why Prayer Force is so beautiful, because it gets us back to that which is our true nature, instead of feeling the bombardment of energy and emotional energy and the emotional hooks that people try to put into us, or those connections are revitalized so that we don't have to be in those mindsets anymore and those old patterns. So sometimes what we're feeling in all of that is other people's, and because so many people are much more intuitive than they give themselves credit for, they can feel other people's situations. They don't always know why, but they do. And that's why it's important to do the clearing. And if you're in a difficult spot, rule out, is this mine or someone else's?
Exactly.
That's a really good starting point.
That's a powerful starting point. This is probably one of the best things I ever learned from one of my mentors, John Holland. He said, "Is this coming to me or from me?" And that in that moment, like that can clear out a whole bunch of energy. Like that's not mine. It's like it's very freeing when you realize half the stuff you're feeling really isn't yours, right?
Absolutely. And so it comes down to, I think, when you're wanting to reconnect with your spirit, to first remember that you're a soul, and to make that set it for yourself that you're going to keep observing your energy level, and that you're going to practice being aware of your space energetically and more mindful of the energy around you, which brings you to that we were talking about before, the priority of spending time in nature and connecting with earth and the trees, but also that healing power of nature, and that healthy time spent outdoors can really reset the weary mind and the weary body. But it's also living in accordance with the cycles of day and night, and harmonizing yourself to the earth and increasing that intuition, but taking time to tune into your soul. Even, believe me, I'm very busy with my work and with my family, and I remember the days with my babies where I was lucky if I had a moment to myself. Taking a shower was just like the highlight of my life.
I totally remember that. I definitely remember what that was like.
But I would take these little moments. I would just kind of breathe, like, okay, yes, this child's in my arms right now, but I'm going to tune into my soul so that I can then tune into my child's soul and really, really be aware of what they need to make it easier on myself. Mm-hmm. So when you're in those moments of, you're feeling overwhelmed and you're feeling that you're not reconnected, it's just as close as taking a deep breath. And you just take that deep breath and you can say a little prayer. Have a snippet of something that you can read. Like for me, because I was constantly taking care of it, I have books all over the house. So at any given moment, if I sat down, right, I could read a little something from a devotional or some book that it would be like I was nibbling on spiritual food. Mm-hmm. And it was something I did throughout the day. So even if you're not a person who could, I certainly do not sit around praying for hours on end. I don't believe we have to turn ourselves into, monks and nuns and things like that. But it's that idea of what kind of food are you eating, that spiritual food. What are you feeding yourself on a daily basis? And if you have that to nibble on through the day, it changes your mindset.
Yes.
It changes who you are going to be and how you're going to show up for other people.
Mm-hmm. That's right. And it doesn't have to be anything complicated either. Like you said, if there's a couple of sentences that really move you, that you found, just write them down and keep them in your pocket. And when you're feeling uncentered, just pull it out of your pocket and read those few words or a sentence or a paragraph, whatever that might be. It doesn't have to be an elaborate procedure to get reconnected in any given moment. And and just taking a breath is huge too.
Looking out the window, even if you could only see a tiny little 2 by 2 inch square outside your window, you focus on that light. And some of the great artists of the past, sometimes what they've had to do is they have been cut off from nature, right? So there's a symbolic cutting off from nature means you cut off from your soul to some extent. But they've been able to find even just that patch of window, like what Van Gogh had to do when he was in the asylum, right? He just had that patch of window. And just by letting a little bit of that light in and knowing that it's always there waiting for you and you could reconnect with it, even if you can't see it, even if you can't see it beyond the walls of the framework of your life, you can see it. Mm-hmm. With your soul. And it's a remembrance that there's something else out there for you that has always been inside you at the same time. Infinitely outward, infinitely inward.
Absolutely. So Willa, what's the best way, if someone would like to learn from you, mentor with you, or have a reading with you, what's the best process to get in touch with you?
So they can reach out to me through my website, Willa White. And on there I do have, under mediumship readings and teaching consultations, you can submit a scheduling request through the form on my website, and I'll get back to you when I can. Booking out a couple of months already, a few months. And so this is my busy time of year coming into even more. So it's important that you're going to reach out as soon as possible if you want a reading soon. The other part of learning with me is you can go on my website. Every couple of months I'll offer different classes. I do update that when I can, but on my Facebook page is the best way to follow what events I'm offering. So if they go to Willa White Medium on Facebook, they can be notified as to when I go live for my own podcasts and also the classes that I offer, whether they be a weekly development circle or other workshops or video learnings.
Mm-hmm. Great. So you do have development circles online as well.
I do, but I run them like a 5-week series typically because that way we're grouped together for that long, and that way people can have that experience of connecting. But that's for people who are really interested in developing their mediumship and giving and receiving messages with partner exercises. If you're not that interested in those kind of things, you might want to hang out until I post up meditation classes and other spiritual development classes, things like that.
Yes, and and like you said earlier, finding a safe place to learn or like-minded people, that's so important. And I can guarantee you, to be in the space with Willa, either online or by phone or in person, this would be a safe place to be and to learn and to unfold your spiritual connection. So highly recommend, Willa. And also your podcast. I love your podcast. And so every Wednesday morning, which obviously they're recorded, so you can view them afterwards. But wonderful guests and a lot of insight and very deep conversations, which I love. So keep doing those podcasts. So what can you leave with people today? Like, say they want to begin to end their day with a connection or feeling connected to something larger than them. What's a great way just to, I know we already talked about, taking a breath and prayer, but what's something you could do before going to bed tonight that you can recommend to people?
So I use the going to bed time, prayer, of course, but I also set that up as a gratitude moment. I say thank you so much for the things that unfolded today. Because when I wake up in the morning, I know it sounds hokey, but this is the prayer that I say. I like rhymes. So I'll say, thank you for this day. Thank you for my work and play.
I love it.
It's just kind of hokey, but it works.
It's
for
not,
me.
Not at all. No, that's great.
It's just easy, and it's not like a huge prayer. But at the end of the night, I just say thank you so much. I'm so grateful for my family. I'm so glad that you got us through such and such. I'm glad that I remembered to turn to you about that, and thank you for helping me to let go of my worry about so and so, right? And so sometimes I'll do it that way, and I don't know that that's prayer. I guess it's really just kind of talking to the source, as it were, and setting up that if I'm going to need anything for the next day while I'm kind of in that half awake, half asleep mode. If there's anything they want to share with me before I go to sleep, then they're welcome to, or in my dreams. And sometimes what will happen is I will wake up in the middle of the night and I'll get this download. I'll be like, like all of a sudden I'll know what to do about such and such, or I'll know what I need to say in this next lecture that I'm doing for a church, or things like that come up. Or one time it was like, wait a minute, you need to RSVP for that wedding. Sometimes it's mundane, but my guides will help me. My spirit guides and angels are so very present, and they can be if they can do that for me, they can do that for you. For anyone listening, you need to recognize that there are a lot of angelic forces that are assisting all of us each and every day, and that we can give over to that and rest easy as we proceed in life. Do your best and then let it go and be in repose for sleep.
Beautiful. Yes. And isn't it interesting with the downloads in the middle of the night too? All the time. It's like 3:00 in the morning, like right now.
Yep. I call it the hour of power.
There you go.
I keep a notebook next to the bed so that I can jot down something, or even if it's dark, I can still kind of there's the paper, and that might be the line.
Yeah, as long as it gets on paper, right? So I do the same thing.
It's about recognizing the gratitude of those moments. Spiritual natural law is one of the things that spiritualists love, and one of the spiritual natural laws is the law of gratitude, and that certainly brings more and more to your life.
Absolutely.
You grow it.
Absolutely. That's a prayer in itself, is gratitude. Well, thank you, Willa. It's been lovely. WillaWhite.com for anybody who'd like to reach out to Willa about her classes or readings. Have a wonderful week, everyone.
Thank you so much for having me on the show.
Thank you for listening to Unity Online Radio, the voice of an awakening world.
As a listener to Unity Online Radio, you might be curious to learn more about Unity, or you might already be well-versed in its teachings and history. Either way, be sure to check out the beautiful new unity.org website. It's arranged to help you find what you need about healing, relationships, prosperity, guidance, and prayer. full of interesting articles, video meditations, and ways for you to discover, grow, and experience. Spend time on the Unity website. It's unity.org.